This is Ankapsu, and now we're going to talk about the plane that was here. The Russian plane that landed in Brasília a few days ago. We made a video about this. No one knows what this plane came here to do, what it brought, what it took, or where it's going. And now we have information that it left Brasília and went to Caracas in Venezuela. Isn't that something? And notice, it doesn't make sense for it to be just a refueling stop or something technical, because the distance from Africa to Brasília and to Caracas is the same. In other words, it came here to Brazil to do something, bring something, or take something. Nobody knows exactly what, right? This same plane was sanctioned by the American government because it was the plane that took the Wagner Group people to Venezuela, to Caracas, to protect Maduro when there was the big uprising in Venezuela back in 2018. You remember there was a huge revolt. People took to the streets. Maduro almost fell at that moment. He only didn't fall because Putin sent the Wagner Group to hold him up there. Now the Wagner Group has been renamed Africa Corps because the Wagner Group itself is over. You remember there was a rebellion by Prigozhin, right? Who was the head of the Wagner Group against Putin. So Putin killed Prigozhin. There's no other way to put it, right? Oh, Prigozhin's plane had an accident and crashed and so on. Of course, it was shot down, right? But yeah, the Wagner Group is over, but it was turned into Africa Corps because it continues to operate in Africa. The plane stopped in Africa, probably picked up some guerrillas there, some mercenaries, and now it came to Brasília, and from Brasília, it's going to Caracas. What's going on? I honestly have no idea. Let's try to understand what we actually know about this story, because we know very little. It's just a really strange story, isn't it? This news was suggested by Peter. Tell us your story. He who lives by the L dies by the L, and several other people. Thanks to everyone who suggested news on our website, visonlibertaria.com, and thank you for watching our video. If you like our content, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, okay? Alright, so this is the big news. The Russian IL-76 plane, which is a military aircraft, okay? It's a dual-use plane, alright? It can also be used for simple cargo transport. But here, the IL-76 operated by Aviacon Zitotrans, which is on the sanctions list. We talked about this in the other video, right? It's very strange that this plane stopped here in Brazil, because in theory, for a military plane to make a stop in Brazil, for a foreign military aircraft to use Brazilian soil, there needs to be a specific authorization for that, and there isn't any authorization. If there was, it was just a verbal authorization, right? The Air Force personnel know about it because it stopped at the Brasília Air Base, right there at the FAB spot, stayed hidden there, and now after that it left Brasília, went to Santa Cruz in Bolivia, then from Santa Cruz it went to Bogotá, and from Bogotá it went to Caracas. What are these people? Look, it's all leftist stuff. Only leftist countries here in Latin America with weak presidents. So we have Brasília, Santa Cruz in Bolivia, Bogotá in Colombia, and Caracas in Venezuela. 4 lousy presidents who all have low popularity and are terrified of the threat of Trump here in Brazil. What is that plane doing here in Brazil? What did that plane come here to bring? What are they after with this whole story, right? So look, it left Bolivia where it stayed for about 6 hours, then took off without identifying its destination with the transponder turned off. Then it landed in Santa Cruz and then went to Bogotá, and from Bogotá it went to Venezuela. So here, look, the aircraft with registration RA78765 landed in Brasília on Sunday the 10th, coming from Conakry in Guinea. Guinea is one of the countries where Russia's Africa Corps operates, right? The former Wagner Group from Russia, and it had previous stops in Moscow, Baku, and Algiers. After landing, the plane was moved to a restricted area of the base where it remained out of public view, except for part of its tail which was visible. Here, look, do you want to see what the image looked like? Here, it shows it here. Notice, it's a very large plane, right? This plane is really huge. Here, look, it was kept in a hidden spot at the base, but you can still see just its tail here because its tail is very large, an area that belongs to the Brazilian army at the Brasília airport, right? Here, look, there's more information in this other article here. A mystery surrounding a Russian cargo plane from a company sanctioned by the United States took over Brasília International Airport. Among the employees, rideshare drivers, taxi drivers, and members of private companies operating at the airport, the information about the plane's landing is surrounded by curiosity, suspicion, and amazement. It's a very large plane, the IL-76, a strategic cargo aircraft often used to transport heavy military equipment. It is operated by Aviacon Zitotrans, which was included on the United States sanctions list for transporting suspicious cargo to Venezuela. So, and notice, even though it was placed on the American sanctions list during the Ukraine war period, it wasn't because of the Ukraine war, it was because of Putin's support for Venezuela, right? And this is what I'm telling you, folks. Look at what Lula is doing to us. Lula is throwing us into this axis of evil, this alliance of dictatorial countries that are fighting against the civilized world, right? The landing in Brasília happened on Sunday the 10th and became a topic among airport staff. The plane is beautiful, huge, it makes a different kind of noise. I don't know what anyway, it's a different plane. It's a military plane and they're not used to military planes landing there in Brasília, right? When it landed, the Russian plane used the airport runway but then immediately moved to the Brasília air base where it was isolated and hidden among trees. But you could still see the tail of the plane. So here, look, it stayed in this area, in this little corner here. I think there's a map here. Here, look, you can see it here. See, this is where it is. The airport runway is right here, the Brasília airport runway. If you go to Brasília, your plane will land on this very runway. Then here you have the passenger terminal, those two big terminals in Brasília shaped like a U, right? That's the terminal there in Brasília, and I think there's another runway down here as well. And here is the Brasília air base. So it's connected to the Brasília airport. The plane is at this spot here in the air base. This whole area here is managed by the FAB, the Brazilian Air Force, right? Here you have logistics companies and so on. There are other things here too, private companies and so on. This is the main area of the Brasília airport. So this area here is the passenger area. When you take a flight in Brasília, this is the area that matters. The plane is here, look, at this point here, or was, right? It was here until it left, until it went to Bolivia and then to Caracas, right? Here you can see the tail of the plane visible here. If you're at the Brasília airport, you can see this plane there, behind the trees in a little corner, right? The presence of the Russian aircraft comes a day after President Lula had a phone call with Vladimir Putin, right? The Planalto stated in a note that the two discussed the current international political and economic situation and talked about cooperation between the countries within the BRICS framework and so on. The arrival of the plane is being compared to the episode in 2023 when Lula authorized 2 Iranian military ships to dock in Brazil. But there have already been other planes here as well, with different things, okay? In fact, remember there was that whole episode with a plane in Argentina, which was a Venezuelan plane that was seized by the Argentine police and later sent to the United States, and it's suspected that it was a cargo plane, In theory, it wasn't a passenger plane, but there were 17 people inside the plane. A bunch of terrorists, classified from Iran and Russia, were listed on the plane in Argentina, right? And in the end, since it was during Alberto Fernandez's government, everyone managed to get away, but the United States ended up keeping the plane. So it's not exactly clear what these people were up to. It's suspected that this was actually a group of drug traffickers. It was meant to help with the sale of drugs to the Los Solis cartel in Venezuela. We might be seeing the same thing happening here. This whole operation here could be part of some drug trafficking scheme, something like that. Or it could be Russian military protection for Lula and Maduro. I think that's unlikely. Russia isn't in any position to do anything anymore. Yeah, even in Africa, they're losing a lot of ground there. In several countries, Russian troops are being pushed back because Russia simply doesn't have any strength left. They were completely destroyed in Ukraine and can't do anything else, right? So that's the situation. ANAC says that the last non-regular operating authorization granted to the company expired in April 2023 and there was no renewal. In other words, in principle, this plane was not authorized to land in Brazil. The Brazilian Air Force FAB confirmed the aircraft's passage through Brazil, but did not provide any information about the cargo or the crew. Infra-America, the company that manages the airport, stated that information could only be obtained from the Brazilian Air Force, FAB, because as I explained to you, even though the civil airport is managed by Infrabras, right? The runway and the military base, there are under the FAB's control. It's the FAB that handles that, right? The report found that at the cargo logistics terminal, there was no request for airport employees to load or unload the plane. In other words, apparently there was no unloading of anything from the plane, at least not at the logistics facility, which is this building here, see, in the logistics area where cargo planes usually unload things. But nothing prevents the FAB soldiers themselves from having unloaded or loaded something here, right? The Russian aircraft can carry between 28 and 60 tons of cargo and accommodate up to 145 soldiers. Besides Russia, other countries also use this same airport. Here, look, it says here, the last stop of the Russian cargo plane was at Conakry Airport in Guinea, which has been used by the Africa Corps to distribute weapons across the African continent. Look at this. Look at the mess we're getting ourselves into here, huh? I'm telling you, my friend, Lula wants to go for the Venezuela solution. The so-called neutral crowd from Sao Paulo voted for L and all. Let's put Lula in. Lula is a Democrat. And now we might end up with Wagner Group soldiers here, or Africa Corps, whichever you prefer to call them. And to keep the president in power in case of a complete breakdown in 2026, which is certainly what Lula is planning. a complete breakdown. He already knows he can't win the election, so what they have left is the Venezuela solution. That's what it is. The so-called neutral crowd from Sao Paulo, Kim Kataguiri, MBL, Nando Moura and all that, threw us right into the arms of all these people here, didn't they? Well, it seems that Senator Bitar from União do Acre complained that the Brazilian people have the right to know with complete clarity the nature of the cargo being transported, who the crew members are, and what the mission of this aircraft is in our territory. It wasn't a resupply, although you could say it was a resupply, right? It's an aircraft that was going from Africa to Venezuela and stopped in Brazil to refuel. That doesn't make any sense. What does make sense is that it's a troop rotation plane, rotating troops. It came to drop off troops from the Africa Corps here in Brazil, Bolivia, and Venezuela, Colombia, and Venezuela. Look, 3 leftist countries. Bolivia has elections this Sunday. The left is expected to lose there as well. And Venezuela, Maduro is all unsettled there. So what is this plane? I don't know. I don't know what it is. Anyway, it's shrouded in mystery and sparks curiosity. Let's see what happens with this. Thank you for watching the video until the end. Besides liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel, consider becoming a sponsor with contributions starting at just $1.99 Reais. Click the join button below to learn about the terms and benefits of sponsoring the channel. For more information about our project, visit the websites shown on the screen.